Hello all, this is a little, not necessarily an album ranking. What I'm listing here is my top favorite groups and bands from the 70s, because that's when I was growing up. What I listened to in the 60s, don't know, don't remember, but whatever. These were bands that I got familiar with in the 70s, listened to them. Now, mind you, I listened to a lot of pop radio too, which was, what was ever on the radio at the time, whether it was, Captain and Tennille or Tony Orlando and Dawn. But those were just pop songs I heard on the radio. And, of course, I liked them. Also liked Edgar Winter Group, Frankenstein. But whatever. Really liked that song. But what I'm doing here is I'm going to go through each decade. I'm going to do the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Not really the 2020s, because, I haven't seen anything that catches my ear. Now, mind you, these bands may have been older, but I didn't get into them until this specific decade. So that's how we're going to proceed. So, coming in at number 10, it would kind of be a tie. It would probably, it would have to be the Jacksons. Or the Jackson 5. This is, which album is this? This is just the Jacksons. It's got Enjoy Yourself on it. But, I used to watch the Jackson 5 cartoon. So I listened to the Jacksons. Absolutely. One of my faves at that point. They're tied with Simon and Garfunkel. Now, my aunt got me into Simon and Garfunkel. That was in the early 70s. Really liked Simon and Garfunkel. Went to go see him at the Central Park concert. I think it was 1980 or 81. Somewhere around that time, I think. I'm not sure. Whenever they played Central Park. But whatever. Next up, now this band, I kind of didn't get, this is going towards more the late 70s. So, that's why they're so far down on the list. That would be The Who. I started listening to other rock and rolls. I hit like 13 and 14. And I did like The Who. So this is Who's Next. Next up, we were kind of into, some of the newer music was coming out. So I started listening to Joe Jackson. This was actually in the late 70s too. As I was older, so I was just getting broad and expanding in what I was listening to. So we liked this. I remember I got into this from my friend Bobby. His brother Dennis, I think, brought this album into his house. So Dennis got me into this. Next up, this was all the rage in 78, this album. So it was just all over the place. So everybody liked it. So, of course I liked it. The Cars. So, that's The Cars. At number 6, we have Black Sabbath. Now, I started getting into Black Sabbath, I think it was in the 7th grade, or maybe early in the summer of 7th grade, going into 8th grade. Black Sabbath. And the kid I used to was do paper out with, sometimes you'd follow him around, Anthony E. I was still in grammar school, went to St. Peter's Elementary in Staten Island, so here you go, Black Sabbath. Now we all, somehow we just got into listening to the Ramones. This is number 5, the Ramones. The Ramones, big band for me. A lot of my friends liked them a real lot, too. They had a movie that was out, Rock and Roll High School. I think we all went and saw that. Some midnight theater. But yeah, we all loved the Ramones. Okay, so number 4. Number 4 would be Mr. Neil Young. Right here, Mr. Neil Young. Now, what basically got me into this was probably American Stars and Bars with Like a Hurricane. This is before that, so I just pulled out this album because I like the album, I like the cover. We also listened to Lynyrd Skynyrd. But I'm putting Neil Young, so we listened to Neil Young a lot. And they had just, as we were hitting 78 or 79, he just released Rust Never Sleeps. Big part of what we were listening to. Now, the next 3 bands, these are bands I was starting in the early 70s, straight through. Now, I won't bring these groups up again in the other decades, mainly because, it's not like I stopped listening to them, but I found so much other new music that I was listening to a lot. I'm still listening to these. So at number 3 on my list in the 70s would be Reginald Dwight, Mr. Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. There's a gatefold. This is a double album. This is an OG album too. Good stuff. Lots of good stuff on here. Benny and the Jets, Candle in the Wind. Those are the big ones. Dirty Little Girl. All the Girls Love Alice. So there you go. I remember, like, it's like, I think he released the album Caribou. And I remember my uncle was like, he's gay. And I was like, I had no clue what that even meant. I was like, he's like, I'm like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, I think it was like 7 or 8. He's like, yeah, he's gay, he likes guys. I was like, okay. I still didn't really fathom what that meant. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, it's just weird. Who tells a 7-year-old that their artist that they like is, I don't know. Weird, very weird. Okay, so number 2, which I listen to all the time, also, would be Wings. Paul McCartney and Wings. Because they were all over the radio. Probably one of the biggest bands of the 70s, next to Led Zeppelin. They're probably the second biggest. Wasn't into Zeppelin yet, but I was definitely into Wings. Wings. And this is like one of my favorite albums. I used to love Uncle Albert and Admiral Halsey. That was a big song for me. Let 'Em In. Band on the Run, of course. And of course, this probably isn't too hard to figure out. My number 1 band, which I got into, I think in 1970, thanks to my Aunt Gail, would be the Beatles. Who've always been a mainstay in my listening pleasure for the past 50 years. The Beatles, my favorite album by the Beatles, mind you. So there you go. There's my top 10 bands, one tied for last, of the 70s. Now, mind you, there was all kinds of other bands we would listen to, but these were my favorites. There was like Styx, Boston, very big. They just weren't, I didn't have the albums by them, but I had albums by these bands, absolutely. And that was my thing. So, anyway, there's my little list. My top bands of growing up in the 1970s. Peace. Have a great day.